Live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Black Podcast. We are excited once again. It's Thursday, and so we have a special guest today. But before we get into our special guest, we want to kind of give you a background of who we are and why we're doing the things that we're doing here on the Black Podcast. My name is Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and I've had 16 years of being an educator as well as a coach. And I knew from then that I wanted to do something bigger. And so now I am helping student athletes to become resilient, making sure that they understand who they are within the sport, but who they are when they're not in the sport, right? We know right now there's so many challenges that are going around, in particular with our young Black males. And that is what my passion is about. So I've had the honor of going around and helping coaches to create systems where our athletes, in particular our young Black males and females, are productive within their program. So not only just making sure that we're going through athletics of the carrying the football and dribbling the basketball, but what are we teaching them within our athletic programs that they can be more productive citizens, whether being entrepreneurs or going on to college. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. So I've had the honor of partnering up with Mr. Street Care, who has a background in social work. And so we created a company called HSBA. And so from there, we have a mentorship and leadership program that we pitch to different high schools, HBCUs, universities, and we teach those necessary skills to our young men so that they don't lose their self within athletics or even lose their self within the educational institution or wherever they're at. And so we want to make sure that you're supporting us in that, because the Black Podcast is about networking. It's about what can we do and who can we bring within our community so our young men and women coming up can be more productive, just productive people and whatever that their future endeavors are, because they may not all go to college and they may not all become professional athletes, but what can they do within their space or within their gift to be productive and effective for the Black community? So that's what I'm passionate about. And as Brian's going to mention here on the Black Podcast, it's important that you're not only just watching these videos, but that you are sharing the content. If you're not sharing the content, then we're not going to grow as a community. So please make sure you do your part in supporting the Black Podcast by sharing the video, sharing the content, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it recorded.
Yes, everything that she said. Guys, you know how they say iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another, woman sharpens. This woman, she be sharpening me, guys. Like, she be sharpening me, and I'm gonna keep it real 100. And that's what we need in the world that we're in today. We need to be able to link arms, sharpen one another, so that we can cut through all of the mess that we have to deal with so much more ease. And that's one of the reasons why we put this platform together, to be able to show you the spectrum of greatness that we have within our community, the spectrum of power that we have, and how when we come together, when we leverage each other's power, we can be that much more powerful and make so much more of an impact. As was referenced earlier, I have a real strong passion in seeing the next generation make a successful transition into adulthood. And that's what drove me back to Mississippi after moving off to Miami when I finished my undergraduate studies. Came back to Mississippi, started a couple different social businesses, nonprofit organization, mentoring programs. And I really just wanted to pour in to that next generation to position them to be able to make more of a smooth transition and give them examples of what the future could be, and not just assuming that they're going to be destined to the immediate environment that they see around them. And I was fortunate enough, as I mentioned, to link up with Dr. Sherelle Hobson. And here we are today. Here we are today with the Black Podcast. Here we are with HSBA, just really ready and geared up to be that force that's partnering with institutions all around the nation, but also partnering with organizations so we can push the necessity of practicing group economics, supporting one another, keeping that dollar in our community for so much longer so that we can have that power. We're about to introduce a gentleman here in just a second. And I just really want everybody to take notes, because some of the things that you're going to hear, you're going to be able to take and apply and be a difference in your community. So off of that note, without further ado, we have Doc. I was gonna say drum roll. we have brother Muhammad with us, brother Deric Muhammad. So, how's it going?
I'm blessed, my brother. Thank you all for having me on. It's really an honor.
And it is our
Awesome.
privilege. We're in your greatness, and as mentioned previous, this is your hour. You know, let's really just bring some real to who it is that's going to be out here being blessed with this goodness. So I'm Dr. Hobson. Get us rolling.
Yep. So we always like to start off with the background so people can understand, because a lot of, especially in our community, youth and everyone else gets to just see, where you're at right now. And so they think, wow, his life is, they start creating their own story, based off of what they see in your pictures or your content. If you can give us a background of where you're from and the dynamics of your family, so that we can kind of build up to where we need and where you're at now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Again, my name is Brother Deric Muhammad. I prefer the title brother because I believe that we've moved into an age where you don't have to have a title in order to be effective, efficient, and or successful. I was born in Houston, Texas, the north side of Houston to be exact. My mother was 19 years of age when she gave birth to me, and I was her third child. So I am the middle child of 5 children. She gave birth to my sister at the age of 15. She gave birth to my older brother at the age of 16, and I was child number 3. Now, I always ask myself the question, usually when a teenager is on her third child, taking that pregnancy to term is usually, there's a conversation there. But I thank God that my mother had faith in God, faith in herself, and love for me enough that I came to term, and here we are. So the vast majority of my childhood, I spent with my grandmother. My grandmother raised me the majority of my childhood. My father passed away when I was 11 years of age. I didn't meet my biological father until I was 8 years old. And then 3 years later, he passed away. My stepfather, whose name is on my birth certificate, was the man who I thought was my dad. And I got a phone call, I think I was around 7 years old. I was at my grandmother's house, and the man called and was like, "Hey, what you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." He's like, "I got some news for you." I'm like, "What?" "I'm your dad." I'm like, "What?" And so that in and of itself was a roller coaster ride. Losing my father at the age of 11 and going through my childhood, a childhood where the vast majority of my childhood, my mother battled with substance abuse. My childhood was a roller coaster ride. But I would be remiss in my duty if I did not say that it wasn't all bad. A lot of people looked out for me when I did not have the capacity or the ability to look out for myself. I could say the same for my siblings. So shout out to all of those family members, those neighbors, the teachers that looked out for me. Because sometimes when we paint the picture of how we grew up in the hood, it's easy to say that I was raised by the streets. That's what a lot of us say. And for some reason that gets attention, to say that you were raised by the streets. And while I may have been influenced by the streets, it would be a disrespect to those who did try to pour in me and invest in me when my mother and father may not have been around. It would be a disservice and a disrespect to them to say that they did not help. And so for the most part, that's the elevator speech about my childhood. I barely graduated high school. When I graduated high school, I was in such a hurry to get off the streets of Houston, Texas, that I joined the military. That was the gift and the curse. I got a chance to travel. I got a chance to be acculturated into other cultures and things of that nature. But to be honest with you, I was a straight up rebel. And about 3.5 years later, I got out. And when I got out, that's when life really started for me. I joined the Nation of Islam, and I have not looked back since.
Wow. So, you know, we talk about, people always say, you know, you're a product of your environment. And that doesn't have to be something negative, but a lot of times they attach it, like you were saying, to something negative. What when you were going through, you know, life, and you had all these different mentors and people in your life, can you speak on just that transition for you when it was time for you to go from how you were raised to now going into the military? If you could just speak on, you know, how that was for you mentally. Like, did you feel like you already knew who you were at that point, or do you feel like you were still kind of just beginning on your journey? Like, talk about that transition for us.
I think that everyone, even as young children, we see ourselves as great. This is one of the things that makes cartoon characters like Spider-Man so attractive to young people, is because they see themselves being able to climb the side of a wall, or what do they say, leap over tall buildings in a single bound. You know, these are expressions of greatness. And it's attractive to children because children really believe, hey, I come from God, I'm a child of God, and I am supposed to grow up to become a God. So I don't think greatness is something that has to be talked into children. Greatness is something that has to be talked out of them. And that's what we face when we grow up in communities, when we grow up in what I call sacrifice zip codes. A sacrifice zip code is a zip code where the resources in that community have been given to other communities so that those communities can thrive, and those in the sacrifice zip code barely survive. I grew up in one of those zip codes. And so when you got mama, daddy, grandma, grandpa working 2 or 3 jobs, coming home, you know, feet hurt, frustrated. Let's say my report card didn't look like it should look. You know, out of that frustration, certain words are spoken that can sometimes beat down the self-confidence of a child. And so I think every child has that greatness in them. I can speak for myself. I had it. You know, no matter how my circumstances may have looked as a teenager, when I laid down at night and I closed my eyes, I saw myself as someone with purpose, as someone who would be great. And transitioning from the mindset that I was given versus the mindset that I was born to adopt, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy to go from Detroit Red to Malcolm X. That's not easy, because you suffer rejection, you suffer disappointment, you suffer from the fact that people don't understand. And when the people around you don't understand the moves that you're making, it creates doubt. And you wonder, man, is what I'm doing making sense? But we have to remember, and I tell my mentees this all the time, if not everybody understands your vision, that's okay. As a matter of fact, that's par for the course, because it's your vision. It's something that God gave you. And if you don't have a vision that nobody else sees as clearly as you, then you're not sharpening your mind enough to be able to see what your true destiny is. And so it was difficult, but we pushed through those difficult times because we believe that the view that we had of ourselves when we were children, even as adults, we still believe in it. And we believe in it so much that any obstacle that gets in our way of achieving those goals and achieving those dreams, They just got to get out of the way because we're not stopping until we get there. And so I'm still trying to get there. I'm not one to think that I have arrived. I don't even know if there's even a such thing, but it's a difficult transition. And I think I'm still going through it right now. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was telling, even when I was speaking to Mr. Streak,
Mhm.
being in this educational system for 16 years, it was almost like I was suffocating in my own space, my own life, because I knew what they were telling us to tell them, but I also knew the truth.
Mhm.
And if you speak the truth, it was like, that could cost you your job, right? So you start having to pick, do I want to keep my job or do I want to speak the truth? Do I want to pay my bills or do I want to save a life? Do I want to? And you're constantly always going back and forth. And so I had to learn how to be in the system, but still speak my truth. And when you talk about that transition, you talk about your purpose, when they talk about God has a purpose and a plan for your life, I used to get so exhausted with explaining my purpose to people, explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing, explaining why I care about this or that, and when I realized that it's my purpose, it's the plan he has for my life. And so maybe it's only meant for me to understand, and people will understand better as we continue to serve. So as you continue to sow seeds, people that need it will gravitate towards it, and everybody else who's watching will either jump on board or they won't. And so I'm glad that you talked about being very vulnerable, like where you're at right now, not even knowing if you're touching the surface of what you're supposed to be doing or will be doing, in the future. Can you speak on just what you believe, like what you know the truth to be, right? Like, even if it doesn't have a title or you're not doing it in your space, like what do you like? I know when I go to sleep, I think about this. When I wake up, I think about that. Like, what is that one thing or those things that you feel like I know no matter what I'll be doing, it has something to do with this?
I think that would have something to do with the greatness of Black people and the ultimate return to our glory. I think that's what's in front of us. When I look at the story of Joseph in the Bible and the way that Joseph became a ruler in the land where he was first a slave, I believe that with all my heart. No matter what the murder rate looks like, it doesn't matter what the literacy rate looks like. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter. Y'all understand what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what our family situations look like. I believe with every ounce, every square feet of my heart that Black people are going to come to power. And when we come to power, we won't handle our oppressors the way our oppressors handled us. But I do believe that it is our time. The problem is Black folk haven't gotten the memo yet. We haven't gotten the memo yet. And so we don't walk, talk, and act as if though it is our time. But that I believe with every fiber of my being. And I do believe that I was born to be a link in the chain that leads us to our ultimate reality, our ultimate rendezvous with destiny. And that is to take over the planet Earth and to begin the process of ruling the earth as it should be ruled. I believe it. And every day I'm up and I'm at it and I'm working toward being a strong link in the chain. And I think that's what we all should be working towards.
Man, there's so much real in that. And it takes me back. It takes me back to when I first watched the movie Selma. And I saw everything that, so many of these civil rights leaders put themselves through, how they literally gave their lives for us to even have the possibility to have some of the same options as so many more of our counterparts, so to say. But then you look at today and there's so many that are just lazy and taking everything for granted and not taking advantage of what's right in front of them. I had a mentor once. He would always mention to me after he saw how I always did more than what was necessary. I always did more than what was required. He started saying, Brian, like, you always, something I've noticed about you is you lean forward. You're willing to do the extra when nobody else around you wants to. And we don't have enough people that are willing to go out and get it. And we see so often, and I put a post up earlier, we want to go and protest and hold up signs and say, hey, you changed this for me, but we're not willing to do what we have to do on our end. So I think it's so vital that you mentioned that, because there's so many of us that we just don't realize that. And you look at some of the the political structures, whereas we buy in to a certain ideology when we really don't know that that's not really even to our benefit. And we allow ourselves to be pulled by the puppet masters. You need to believe in us, vote for us, but you don't even know what we do, what we're really about. When you really know what we're about, you ain't trying to vote for neither one of us. You're trying to vote for self-interest. And I feel like when we really understand what self-interest is and how, if we come together with that focus on the self-interest, we will eventually get to where we gain that economic prowess, to where we got that seat at the table. Because as so many don't like to admit, money talks. And whenever you can put yourself in a certain position to be able to be at that table, eventually you can take a couple screws here and there, a couple, pieces of wood, and build your own table. But you have to be able to be willing to do what you have to give, to give what you have to give, to be able to go out and be that extra joint to move just to move the whole mission forward. So I think it's so much in what you just mentioned on that. There was one thing that you mentioned earlier I wanted to kind of elaborate on. When you were coming up, when we all are coming up, that first 7 years or so in life, we're absorbing everything around us. And it's not like they have to teach us what we're doing. We're kind of absorbing it, and then we're acting it out as we go on in life. And I kind of tie that into what Dr. Sherelle Hobson was mentioning. Whenever you're working under certain, professional settings, that system is like your parents. It's not allowing you to be yourself. It's not allowing you to express naturally. So one of the things that, she and I have been working on is really being able to get into a more independent space. So what I would like you just to kind of speak a little bit more on is, as you grew up and you really got to a stage where you were like, you know what, I'm going to go after doing the work that I know I'm meant to be doing. How was your transition from maybe being part of some of these systems of the world to being the creator of the systems that you wanted to operate within and to bring other young men to operate within? How was that transition of becoming more of that independent thinker?
It was natural, but it was tumultuous. Again, it wasn't easy, because in order to be a freedom fighter, you have to be free to fight, which means you have to be financially independent enough to where you can say what you want to say without fear of censorship or someone cutting off your bread. I was blessed to come into activism under a spiritual umbrella, where we're taught you always depend on God first and foremost. People can give you a blessing, but you have to understand that those people and even those systems are just the vessel by which God blesses you. So he's not blessing you The person's not blessing you. God is blessing you through the person. And having a fearless faith in God is very, very important, especially if you're talking about standing up for Black people. But at the end of the day and at the beginning of the month, activist bills come in the mail as well. And so you have to learn sort of how to navigate, around these systems so that you're able to exist while you resist, if that makes sense. I was blessed to step out of the hood into the Nation of Islam. And the Nation of Islam itself is a system. It's a self-contained system. So that gave me a support system that a lot of other activists and a lot of others who are trying to make that transition may not have had. And within that support system, I found so much help, so many mentors, people that will take a key and unlock a door for you, that my transition it definitely wasn't easy, but it probably was, a lot better than someone else's because I had that support system. And that being said, that's what's important. You have to plant yourself around like-minded people who are headed in the same direction as you are. If you set a goal in life and it's something that you can accomplish by yourself, then you're not thinking big enough. You're not thinking big enough. And what happens is when you begin to link up with others who have similar ideas and similar ambitions, what you do is, before you know it, sometimes unwittingly and unknowingly, you start to create a system of your own. Even if something as menial as, we talk 3 times a day, that's something that's systemic or systematic. And so, and I think I know where you're going with your question. Our problem is not with individuals. Our problem is with systems. It's with systemic racism, systemic discrimination, the systemic inequality. And in order for us to solve systemic problems, we have to come up with systemic solutions. So if you have a job and you're placed within a system and you're taking home a paycheck every 2 weeks, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're doing temporarily. That should never be the ultimate aim. But it is better to work a 9 to 5 than to be working from 3 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the prison cell because somebody told you that criminal behavior was more honorable than working a job. But I say all that to say, in order for you to step off a job where you're being systemic, you're a part of a system that's paying you and feeding you, you have to start a business. But within that business, you have to create a system that's just as efficient as the one that within the job that you fixing to step off of. And it's very, very important that we as a people learn how to build systems, because if we don't build systems, we won't be able to properly govern. Mm-hmm. And I had a support system, and I think that helped me out a whole lot, brother.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I'm glad you said that, Brother Muhammad. One thing, you're speaking a lot of good nuggets there. A couple of things, when you talked about surrounding yourself around people that have similar interests, I always tell people, or I tell my mentees, and that don't just find yourself surrounding yourself with people who have similar interests, but people who believe in you and what you do. So right. When people attach, and I believe we do that a lot as a Black community, we attach ourselves to a trend, or we attach ourselves to whatever, just something. And then when that something changes, everybody dies off. You don't hear about it anymore or whatever. But if we start looking at, every time I see a young man or a young woman, or especially a young man, I think about my brother, when I lost my brother. Mm-hmm. I feel like when God speaks through us, he speaks through us through people.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter if they're on the street or if they're sitting in my class or wherever. I automatically treat that person or that young man as someone that he's my responsibility. So whatever I need to do while he's in my presence, whether it's speak life to him, whether it's show him something new, I feel like that is our responsibility. And I always talk about how powerful we are as Black people. But the problem a lot of times that I see is the lack of consistency. We make a lot of noise, we cause a lot of, we can shut things down like this, but then we go back to our normal lives once everything is done and over with. How much we have to be more consistent for people to take us serious. And when you talk about the system, you have a choice to make. You can be a part of this system or you can create your own.
Right.
So when you see that there's an issue, instead of sitting in these meetings and saying this is a problem, you create your own solution. What can I do to address the problem? And what I realize is that me having the passion about young Black males and seeing what happens in the system. For example, one thing that always triggers me is when you see a young Black male who come in and maybe he's not paying attention. Well, you got a Black student who's not paying attention, running all over the place. You have a white student who's not paying attention, running all over the place. Well, one student is labeled as just being a kid. The other one is labeled as he's out of control. Well, the kid that's out of control is always us. And so the only option from there is let's put him on meds. Let's put him in special education. Let's stick him in the classroom with the rest of the kids that have disabilities. And then we don't have to worry about him. And so, that's one of those systems or one of the things that I see that I'm like, this is just not going to work for me. But it's a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. They're not going to tell the parents, hey, once your child is in special ed, this title or this label follows them for the rest of their life. So if you were taught as a young boy that something is wrong with you, that you can't read, you can't talk, you got this problem, you got that problem, well, eventually it's going to start creating or manifesting in your life, right? And so I remember we had a guest on here and I said, we have this broken system, in education. He said it's not broken. And I was just like, why would he say that? But he said, because the system, what they built is doing exactly what they wanted to do.
Right.
So when you're in the outside and you're speaking, or like when I'm speaking on, there's a broken system, people are looking at me like, well, what's broken about it? It's working for us, but it's not working for us. It's working for them. When you started to create, or when you're right now that you're in that space, and you're thinking about the people that you surround yourself with. And I also believe that when we're in alignment with him, he aligns other people according to that purpose in our life. And I truly believe that. So, right now within your circle, what is one of the most important things for you? Is networking something that you do, or do you just really work on self? How do you attract the support group that you have right now? Is something that you seeked, or was it something that you felt was presented to you? Can you explain or elaborate more on your support system right now and how you came about it?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. I don't do as much networking as I could or should do, but I'm very selective with who I surround myself with. At this stage in my development, I'm trying to surround myself, first of all, with young people. Young people keep you young. Young people always have fresh ideas. And we live in a world that's changing very, very fast. When you go to sleep tonight, you'll wake up in the morning, it'll be a totally different world. That's how fast things are changing. And so in order for you to stay on the cusp of all of these different changes that are taking place, you have to surround yourself with people who are younger than you are. You must surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are in certain areas. If you're not good with numbers, connect with someone who is. and allow them to teach you or to help you to do the numbers work that needs to be done. If you're really trying to be effective in getting messages out there, you want tech people on your team, tech people in your circle. You know, right now, it's really not about me making friends with nobody. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I'm definitely not trying to sound arrogant, but I was always taught that the first thing that they had in the universe was motion. That's what came first. But what followed motion was order, organization. I think we're sort of past the time where debating is a thing. It's about execution now. And I tell young activists all the time, you have a right to be passionate. You have a right to be angry. But we must never be more angry than we are organized. Because anger can get, everybody riled up. But it is organization that is going to move us forward. So I'm looking for young activists who they may not be talkative at all.
Right.
They may walk around with the rimless glasses on, with the pencil in their shirt pocket or whatever. But they know how to organize. They know how to move things.
Yeah.
I think those are the MVPs of the next struggle. Not I shouldn't say the next struggle, but because what we do is we hand the baton of the struggle off from generation to generation. And that's what we need right now. We need more organization. We need more systemic participation. We have to be willing to do the work that does not garner applause. We have to be willing to do the unsexy, unpopular, up all night till 4 a.m. No Instagram Live, no Facebook Live.
Yep.
The planning in the war room so that when the sun comes up, we can move out and get the work done for the least of our people. And so those are the type of people that I try to surround myself with.
Brother Muhammad, can you elaborate on just another thing? When you're teaching them about organization and being able to control their emotions, when we get very passionate about something, to the outside world, it comes off aggressive. But it's just it's like me, anything I'm very passionate about, I'm crying about, I'm serious about, now something I don't care about, I could care less. But how do you teach that, where to have that, like how to be able to be passionate, be productive, be consistent, be organized, but then control your emotional state? Because I believe that when you are expressing your passion or your love for something, people from the outside can really push you to turn what you meant your message to be to now it's something totally different. And that's why we start seeing people start getting angry, because they're expressing themselves out of passion, but they're looking at it as being aggressive. So now you have this disconnect, and now sometimes our reaction now is reacting back in aggression, because that's what the energy that we're receiving back. How do you teach your young men or women about, how to control that section of being emotional, being passionate, you know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm getting to? How do you teach that?
Right. And that's an interesting question, because my approach with a female or a girl or a woman would be different from my approach with a boy or a man. And if you hear any noise in the background, that's my landscaping guy. He always comes right when I'm in the middle of an interview. So I'll be talking a little loud. If my voice elevates, that's why. I'm trying to make sure you all can hear me. I think we have to redefine what it means to control your emotions. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean that you shouldn't cry. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean that you shouldn't be passionate about what you believe in. Controlling your emotions does not mean that you can't express yourself. You can't express your emotions. One of the problems that we have with young boys is that they are aggressive by nature. That's in the DNA of a young male. And they feel very, very passionately on the inside. And if they're not given an outlet by which they can express that passion, then it comes out in a non-constructive, destructive way. And we see it all too often. But I think controlling your emotions means, and this is what we're taught in the Nation of Islam, you must rise above emotion into the thinking of God. So that means once you've had your moment where you shed your tears for Breonna Taylor, once you had your moment where you've marched and said no justice, no peace for George Floyd, now it's time to take that same energy and you have to channel that energy in an organized effort to make certain that there are no more Breonna Taylors, are no more George Floyd. And you find your place within that system and within that space, and you work like hell for the betterment of your people and the betterment of your community. But if all we do is yell and scream, and I don't think we should be so concerned with what other people think. Like, I think Black people spend too much time worrying about how white people see Black people. And as sad as it is that a little Black boy can make the same mistake as a little white boy. The little white boy get a second chance, and the little Black boy, gets extreme punishment. That is the reality of the system that was created to keep us down and keep them empowered. There is nothing that we can do about how white people see Black people. The future of Black people is not determined by how white people see Black people. The future of Black people is determined by how Black people see Black people. And so what we suffer from, my dear sister, is what I call a poverty of identity. A poverty of identity. There are different forms of poverty, Brother Brian. A recent study coming out of Harvard University said that right now in 2021, there's more depression in America than there was during the Great Depression. Think about it. Now, people aren't being threatened with the thought of not being able to have a meal on the table in the morning. For the most part, everybody eating. But people are lacking a sense of self, a sense of soul. And Black people in general, Malcolm said that one of the things that was taken from us when we were brought here on slave ships is that our identity was stolen. Guess what? It was never returned. It was never given back. And so it's easy for a young person who might get a little money in their pocket. They got to have the Mercedes, got to have it. They got to have the Dior, shirt. Not only do they want a Dior shirt, they want it to say Dior all over the shirt. They want the Gucci belt. I'm going to tuck my shirt. Hey, you haven't tucked your shirt in 10 years, but you're going to tuck your shirt in so everybody can see that G. See, because we suffer from a poverty of identity, we believe that adds value to us. When in truth, it is we who add value to it. And so until we are able to spend the time with our young people and teach them who they are and whose they are, you'll always have a situation where we are more emotional than we are organized, because See, emotion is a reaction. But if you're organizing, that means you actually know what you want. You know where you're going. And there's no way for you to really and truly know what you want and where you're going if you suffer from a poverty of identity.
I wish you had a mic that you could drop right about now. Man, and it's so real. It is so real. And it makes me think about some of the marches that we saw last year, some of the protests that we saw. And a lot of the people who we saw out there protesting, as soon as things started to die down, they just went back to their same old life. No organization to say, okay, what next? Okay, we did that. They talked about maybe passing some laws. Okay, we're successful. No, like that is nothing. And then at the same time, and I heard this in small little pockets on certain radio shows. Man, when this protest gonna be over? When this boycott gonna be over? I gotta go get my new Louis belt. I gotta go get this. When you are sitting there waiting for the protest, when you're waiting for the action, for the boycott to be over so that you can go back and reinvest into them, you're not doing it for the right reason. And it's so unfortunate. And you would see, I forget the name of the gentleman, and I should be ashamed of myself for forgetting, but this black-owned supercar. We're so quick to go out and want to get the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, but a black-owned supercar that is pretty much an equivalent of what these other cars are has another name by a black man. And we are so quick to shame this car, but go jump all over the Lamborghinis. And it's sad that, like you said, our identity being stripped from us while we were brought over here. And now we grab onto what we have over here as if this is the identity that we want to internalize. And until we get to a point where I don't need that, let's build ours, we're always going to be captive. Always.
I agree.
Wow.
And like Sherelle was saying, it's easy to get the protest together because it's emotional. I mean, if you saw George Floyd with a knee on his neck for, 9 minutes and 49 seconds, however long it was, 10
too long.
Yeah, did not move you, then you're dead on the inside if that didn't move you. But it's like Sister Sherelle it's not enough to simply be moved by that. After emotion must come motion, forward motion. And we can't have that if we're not unified. We cannot have that if we're not organized. And we cannot have that if we're not clear on what it is that we demand as a people. Like right now, I see a battle of ideas taking place in the culture. It's a battle of ideas. It's not necessarily the battle between the young and the old, but it's a battle of ideas. You see how when the President Biden made June 16th, that's Tupac's birthday, and make that a federal holiday, right? When he made Juneteenth a federal holiday, the civil rights generation who was still among us, most of them rejoiced. Many of them rejoiced. Some didn't. While for the most part, most younger people, most millennials and those from the Generation X or whatever you call, I don't keep up with the generations, they're basically saying, nah, that's not enough. And I gave the analogy, if I go to a restaurant and I order steak and potatoes, and all the waiter comes back with is gravy. If I demand my steak and potatoes, does that say that I'm complaining? I mean, no, I have a right to get what I ordered. And all the younger generation is saying, we did not order Juneteenth as a federal holiday when we voted for you. That's not what we ordered. we want our steak and potatoes. And it made me feel good to hear a certain demographic within the culture express the fact that we want more. We want more. We don't want to settle anymore. And I think that's where it starts. It starts with us not wanting to settle, especially considering all that our ancestors suffered. We don't have a right to settle.
It's like we get the pacifier and we're satisfied. Like the Juneteenth, that's the pacifier. But we got all these acts that have been proposed.
It's like
year after
year. They
after
just give
year
you. They give you a little.
Let me give them
bit
something to shut them up. Yeah. And we have these laws that are looking to be passed that can bring about systemic changes. Nah, like, well, I mean, that can wait. At least we got Juneteenth. At least we can go get turned up. Like, don't take the pacifier and be satisfied. And we so often do that. Even when you look at social welfare, like right now, there's so many people who are getting unemployment benefits that is more than what they were making on their job. But if you actually want to continue to push yourself forward in life, like that still doesn't do it. You can't get comfortable with that. And it's like you taking that pacifier, just sitting back. Thank you for taking care of me, Uncle Sam. And we can't be that person. We can't be that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When the baby's crying, you can bring the pacifier.
You know, when you talk about poverty, identity, when you talk.
I can't hear you.
I think we're losing you. We're losing you, Sherelle. I think she was going back in the direction of poverty of the identity, but you know, that's something. And,
go ahead.
All right, I think we got you back now.
Okay.
Yeah, what were you saying, Sherelle?
Hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. All right, I think we got a lag.
Okay.
So I'll take it. I'll take it in
you were talking about poverty, and so when you were talking about poverty and identity, and we really break it down, you know, poverty is a state of feeling inferior.
I can't hear you, sis.
Yeah, we lost you again.
And so you think about identity is either his whole career.
Yeah, you keep chopping out. But you know, when it comes to the whole poverty of identity period, one of the initial components of our mentoring and leadership program that we're looking to link up with these academic institutes with, we start out with helping students understand their identity, because typically an identity has been placed on them by society. Oh, you a baller, like you gonna make it to next level, you're gonna go play D1, you're gonna go to the league, and that's all they know themselves as. They don't know the fact that, you know what, I actually have some artistic ability to do X, Y, Z. And that's one of the areas that we focus in. Can we tap into you and see where else do you excel, so that we can at least say, you know what, if, God forbid, but if I'm not able to make it to that next level playing whatever sport, I have the connections that are going to help me go down this avenue. And one of the things, I'm not a real big TV watcher, but I've started watching this YouTube. I started watching this YouTube. Just a second here. I think she came back in. I started watching this YouTube series, podcast series called I Am Athlete. And I absolutely love watching those fellas, because they talk about the Black community. They talk about mental health. They talk about us not settling for who it is that we was, but continuing to transition to that next stage, to that next stage, to that next stage in life. But you have to have some type of intact identity of who it is that you are. but not only who you are, but who it is that you're looking to become as you age throughout life. So, Sherelle, I'm not sure where you were about to take that, but go ahead and take it back.
So what I was saying before, we talk about poverty being, a state of being inferior, state of being inferior. And then you have identity is what, challenges us to our behavior, how we behave, how we speak. And so when you combine those two, it really spoke a lot to me because and I remember it was a very successful Black money out here in Houston. He told me that majority, more than half of he felt like because he was on top that he had. So when he showed up to these certain places, it was almost like a state of I made it, like all this other stuff. And so he felt like that was something that identified him as being like a part of something, part of like having the nice car, have this white woman. Now identity we talk about, it's always attached. Our poverty identity, I will money, we're taught to have flashy things, you have money, you should have a nice car, the nice clothes. We're not invest your money, build a community, have a nice home before you worry about having a nice or having savings or having money or being able to, do all these different things that take you out of the problem. Some of the things that you feel like, first tell us, what do you think are some of the things that you feel are keeping the Black community in that space of poverty, as far as solution to how do we get out of that space? Because we already know it's a problem. What can we do? What's the first step that you believe the Black community or as an individual can do to change that mindset of poverty, who you know, identity?
Okay. And I think if I understand your question well enough or clear enough, like what can we as a community and we as individuals do to bring ourselves out of the state of poverty of identity? I think we have to reevaluate the things that give us our identity.
Like changing the narrative of that.
Definitely. We definitely have to change the narrative. Like, I think we have to change the way we speak about the hood. Because if every influential voice, like rappers per se, when they talk about the Black community, and not all of them, but some of them, if all they talk about is the shootouts, the dope dealing, the prostitution, and getting it out the mud, well, why would somebody want to invest in a community like that? But that's not the reality of the Black community. That is a reality of the Black community, but for the most part, shootouts don't take place on every block in the hood. And so we have to change the narrative by telling those stories that empower, not just those stories that will get the most attention. A rapper could have been raised in a two-parent household with two educated family members. When he raps about his childhood, he's going to try to make it seem like he had to get it out the mud because that's what gets him the most attention. So changing the narratives are most certainly critical. That's very, very critical. But also, my dear sister, Brother Brian talked about that first 7 years when you're a child, from age 1 to 7. It is during that period of time where your mind is most vulnerable, your mind is just wide open. And the things that you learn about yourself become the foundation for your identity. One of the things that gives a child his or her identity are the things that his or her family applauds, the things that you clap for. You have to be careful of what you clap for around your children. When I go into a middle school and I ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And hands go up. I want to be a football player. I want to be a rapper. I want to be a basketball player. And we ask the question, why? Why does this young brother want to be a football player? Oh, because he wants to make a lot of money and drive, a Bentley Arnage like LeBron James. He's 6 years old. He's not worried about no Bentley right now. He's 5 years old. You want to know why he wants to be a football player? The primary reason is because nobody pays attention to him at home. But on Sunday, when he comes from outside playing and he comes into the living room, everybody's sitting around a television clapping for Ezekiel Elliott. So yeah, that's exactly what I want to be. I want to be what my family is clapping for. I want my family to be proud of me as well. These are some of the things that give children their identity. The words that you speak over and over and over again to your child. If you call your child little nigga enough, at some point he gonna start acting like I'm not gonna say it. I already said it once.
Right. He gonna act just like what you said he is. Yeah.
You're programming him. You're not just programming his conscious mind. You're programming his subconscious mind. You tell that child, you look just like your daddy, and you ain't gonna be nothing, just like your no good dad. You tell him enough. Tell him that enough times, sooner or later, he gonna start walking to the beat of that drum. And so we have to be careful of the environment that we create for our children, because it is the environment that begins to give them their identity. And so there are many things that I would say that plays into the role of giving a child his or her identity. Poverty will begin to shape your identity. I'm talking about financial poverty. I remember coming home from school, I was in 6th grade. And in my neighborhood, all of the schools are fashion shows. If you didn't have what they call the drip, you were nobody, right? So we didn't have a lot of money. We lived in the projects, but I borrowed enough clothes from over here, got enough of this and that for Christmas on my birthday to where I could keep up with some of the better dressed, children in the school. But I came home one day and walked into our apartment, and the entire apartment was empty. It was totally empty. And my mother was sitting on the floor with her hands in her face, and she was just crying her eyes out. And I was like, Mama, we moved already? Because I had been seeing the eviction notices on the door. I would make it home before she did sometimes. She was like, no, baby, we didn't move. I'm like, what happened? She said, the constables came and took our stuff. And I remember asking her, what's a constable? And she said, well, she explained it to me. And I'm like, well, let's go get our stuff. Can we go and get our things? She said, well, the only way we can get it is to go to an auction. And I'm like, what's an auction? And when she explained to me that all of our things were gone, everything, I wasn't worried about the TV. I wasn't worried about food. I wasn't worried about anything else. I was worried about the fact that the only articles of clothing I had was clothes on my back. I was 11 years old. And that just traumatized me. So now I'm like, I can't go to school tomorrow.
And that was during the time of you finding out about your father, right?
Right around the same apartment that where I got the news when my dad died. Yes. I agree. Yeah, right. Very, very, very sharp. Very, very keen, sister. But that being said, I sometimes wonder why I would end up in a clothing store just shopping for no reason. Because being fly, looking good, having nice clothes became a part of my identity due to poverty. I never wanted to have that feeling again of coming back home and I didn't have no clothes to wear. And it was buried back here. I had to get some help with that. Now I wear the same clothes, over and over again. But it became a part of my identity. And so we have to begin to evaluate those things that shape our identity and make certain that we're not being manipulated by a poverty of identity. But for Black youth, Black youth have to study Black history. You're not gonna have no identity if you don't study Black history. If nobody teaches you Black history. Black youth have to know that there are Black people in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelations, from cover to cover. Like, these are things that help to give you your identity. They have to know that our ancestors were landowners. These are things that we have to, put in their minds and hearts so they can have something to identify with other than a Gucci belt.
Yeah. If anything for your identity, if it's attached to something that's materialistic or that can be taken away, then it's not your identity. Clothes,
Right.
shoes, house, whatever. If somebody can remove it from you, then it's not part of your identity. And I think
Right.
that's always a start. So none of these things identify me, even if it's people, people that are attached to you. That's still not your identity. And I think when you're talking about our identity, a lot of it has been us, we call like faking it till we make it. If I can just surround myself around this and surround myself, you start to, it's a good analogy to use, but it's also a bad one, because the good one is almost like when you were a young child, where you dreamed, like you talked about being a superhero. So you can fake it till you make
Right.
it. So if you want to feel like you're successful and you feel like that, that's okay if you act out in what you feel you are. But when the acting stops,
Right.
or the things stop and you acting, that's what the problem is. So it's like, are you still successful or do you still feel important or have value when you don't have the shoes and the clothes and the this and the that?
Yeah.
That's when the faking it to the make it becomes an issue, because some of us are so attached to things and people that shape our identity that when that stuff gets stripped from us, we start having the mental health issues, and we start having, all these other, problems, because we've attached our identity to something and not attaching it to either someone that is higher, or attaching it to God, or to a higher being, to a universe, or to something. When you don't attach it to something that has substance, when you don't attach it to something that has substance, you're always going to find yourself searching for the next thing.
Exactly.
I think that is the hardest part, is that's the first beginning. Like, if anything that you identify yourself with is something that you bought or something that somebody said, it could be words like you talked about, and even I spoke about, when you're speaking certain things into these young men and women's lives, that's who is going to manifest in their life. So when you have a kid who's in the educational system and you're always telling him, oh, you can't read, you can't write, you're mentally disabled or retarded or whatever, he's going to start thinking that that's exactly what he is. So I just think it's so important, like you talked about, that identity and detaching yourself from, certain, I guess, stigmas that's been placed on us. Even, one I would say would be like the strong Black woman and the strong Black man. That's something that has been attached to us, to where we don't we're not vulnerable. We don't want to share our story. We don't want to have emotions because it's come off as being weak or not being strong. And, all those things kind of channel our identity. Can you speak on how you remain in your truth? Like, what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you stay grounded to the truth, so that the outside or the worldly things don't affect your movement or what you're doing or how you shake on your daily basis? If you could speak a little bit on that.
Good question. And this conversation keeps going back to systems. I think I have, I don't think I have, I know I have. I've created a system in my life where purpose preponderates and takes a front seat to everything else. Everything else. And it's not that you're not impacted or affected and sometimes even taken off track by the things that happen around you. But you have to set up a system that gets you back on track every day. Anybody that tells you that they're just this freight train who never gets thrown off the track is lying. They're definitely faking it till they make it. And they're doing more faking it than making it. So it's not about if you're gonna fall, it's about when. And if so, have you set the proper handlings in place in your life where you could pull yourself back up as quickly as possible? And so from the time I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I make my prayers, because I know that I can't do it by myself. I don't have the strength, but I can borrow enough strength from God to be able to get the task at hand done in a way that makes me look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm proud of you today, boy. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you hit potholes. Sometimes you fall flat on your back. Sometimes it takes you a couple of days to recover. Like, this is the reality of it. But for the most part, I have systems set up in place. I have to take time to sharpen my brain. There is an adage that says, if I've been given an hour to cut down a tree, I'm gonna spend 50 minutes sharpening my axe. You give me an hour to cut down a tree, I'm gonna spend 50 minutes sharpening my axe. Your axe is your mind. And if you can keep this intact and keep this in check and keep this from not running off the track, everything else will be okay. I work out a lot, just about every day. That's the way that I manage the pressures, not just of life, but the pressures of being in the position that God has placed me in to help people. When people can get a hold of your phone number and people calling you every day with their problems, if you think that you can handle that without there being a mechanism by which you can manage that stress and manage that pressure, it'll kill you. It will kill you. So those are some of the things that I do. But I also try to just maintain a humble mind state. I think that humility is one of the greatest strengths that we can develop as human beings. As long as I don't take myself too seriously, then I'm not easily offended. I'm not thin-skinned. When things don't go the way that I thought that they should go, I don't take it personal. At least I'm striving to be this way. And that's that. I hope I answered your question. But those are some of the things that I do to maintain. And sometimes
Creating your own system.
Right. And sometimes I turn off the phone. Sometimes I disappear. I don't mean to do so, but sometimes I'm hard to get a hold of. And it's not because I'm trying to get away from anybody, but it's because I realize that I need that time and that space to press the reset button.
Man, now I'm so glad that you just mentioned that piece because I became back in 2017 a very, very highly demanded ear just to hear people. You know, people knew that I was going to listen. They knew I wasn't going to judge. I was going to give, you know, some good feedback. So I was that first person they wanted to call. And about a year and a half or so ago, I started slowly but surely creeping into a system of my own. Like, don't call me without texting me to schedule a time to talk first, because I'm probably not going to answer because I'm doing a task that I predetermined my attention is intentionally going to be on this task during this window. And if somebody calls me and I answer it, I'm throwing that schedule off. And what if somebody else calls me and I'm answering them? Somebody else called me and I'm answering them. I'm talking about just backed up missed calls. And I let the person know, hey, let me know what windows you have available and we can set aside a time. Because if I'm continuously allowing myself to pour out, I'm going to be empty. And eventually I'm going to hurt somebody because I'm going to pour some dust on them because I don't have any more to pour. So we have to take care of ourselves. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Self-care is so huge. And I do a session on Clubhouse on Wednesdays on self-care and entrepreneurship. Whereas it's so often we go out and we have the whole notion of, you know, just grind. And I ain't gonna lie, like I put in some work, but there's certain periods of the day my phone ain't on, or if it's on silent because this is me time. I have to recuperate. I have to rejuvenate. And I'm just so glad you mentioned that because it's so critical for us to focus on. Right. So
if you could leave, you know, a special note, or not a special note, but if you can leave one thing and speak directly to that young Black male, Brother Muhammad, and if you could speak to that one woman or young girl, what would those two things be? And then also let us know where what you have coming up that we can support you and where people can find you. So first, you know, what is that one piece that you would like to leave with that young Black male? And then what is another piece that you would leave with our sisters?
For the young Black male, the piece that I would leave is to see yourself as a human being born from his mother's womb with a book in your hand. You got a book in your hand. And in that book is written the story of your greatness. From cover to cover, from the first chapter to the last chapter is written the story of your greatness. From the time you come out of your mother's womb and you're on the delivery table, there is somebody trying to take that book from you and rewrite that book so that that book does not end with your greatness, but that book ends with your demise. The book ends with you in prison. The book ends with you broken spirited. The book ends with you poor and destitute. And that's what it's like being a Black man in America. It's waking up every morning protecting your book, making certain that nobody takes your book, your greatness from you, and making certain that the final chapter in your book is the chapter that God wrote, not the chapter that the prison system wants to write, not the chapter that the government of America wants to write, not the chapter that corporate America wants to write. Protect your book. But you must first realize that there's always somebody trying to take it from you. And when you have that mindset, then you're protective of your spirit and you're protective of your life. To my sisters, being the father of 4 daughters, you know, and I would speak to any young sister the way that I would speak to my own daughters. Understand that attention is temporary, but respect that lasts forever. And if you have a choice between getting attention and gaining respect, always choose respect over attention. Not everything that gets you attention gains you respect. Not everything that gets you respect gains you attention. It is better to do without the attention and walk in dignity and respect than to get the attention, but at the same time feel empty on the inside because you don't feel respected. So that's what I would say in a nutshell to my sisters. And let me say thank you all so much for taking the time out to spend this time with me. I think it was time well spent. It's an honor to be a guest on the podcast. And I would like for everyone within the sound of my voice, you know, we're having a robust conversation about how do we save Black boys. And one of the highlights of my life, one of the better chapters in my book, in my humble opinion, would deal with the last 12 years that we spent hosting the Smarten Up Black Male Summit, where we address issues exclusively dealing with Black men and boys here in America. And so our next Black Male Summit will be this Saturday. It'll be live online. So anyone who wishes to participate, you can watch. But we would ask you to go and register at blackmalesummit.eventbrite.com. That's blackmalesummit.eventbrite.com. We would love to have you to tune in to what it is that we have to say about education, survival, and the success of Black men in this country. But again, thank you all so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Thank you, Brother Deric Muhammad. It was definitely a blessing, and we know that you haven't even touched the surface yet of what you're going to be doing and the amount of influence that you'll have in our community. So please continue to do and operate in your gift because you're doing it well, and we need more brothers like you out here. And so, as a sister, I thank you for your compassion, your love, your respect for Black women, and I appreciate you. And so we also appreciate you here on the Black Podcast.
Yes, indeed. And just a FYI, I already got my registration in. I will definitely be.
You cheated. I didn't even get a chance to get on there. I wanted to be able to tell you I beat to it.
I said, let me check out this link here. And hold up, that's this weekend? Let me check my calendar real quick. Yep, I'm going to be in there. So, yes, we appreciate everything that you drop with us. When I titled this session what I title it, Always Bring Truth. Like that can be the most difficult thing for us to do sometimes, is be truthful, because we don't want to hurt feelings. We don't want to step on toes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to be thankful that we did. And I'm thankful that Dr. Sherelle Hobson found you, and you were able to grace our presence today and bless our audience. And again, you guys, blackmalesummit.eventbrite.com, grab your tickets. I got my ticket. I'm going to be there. That's 12 noon. And what time zone is that? That's 12 noon Central, right?
Correct. Yep. 12 noon Central, sir. blackmalesummit.eventbrite.com.
Yes, indeed. And I'll make sure that we drop it in the comment section as well, so that people can easily click on it and go straight to it. Or also go to your Instagram account. And let me drop that handle real quick. Instagram is Deric.
At Deric Muhammad, DERIC MUHAMMAD.
Got it. All right. So again, we thank you for being here, and we're gonna have to do an encore one of these days, because an hour and a half is not enough time for all the goodness that you had to share. So we shall see you on the flip side, and thank you again. You take care now.
Thank you,
Peace
brother.
and blessings. Thank you. Thank you, Queen.
All right. So,
Wow. I mean,
and another one.
make sure first of all, make sure that you sign up for the Black Summit, the Black Male Summit.
Black Male
It's
Summit.
important. That's one thing that you can do. You never know who's in your circle of people that may need to be a part of that event, or maybe there may be something you learn in it, and how you can help and address some of the issues that we have in the Black community with Black males. So please make sure you go out and support him and support the cause and the movement that he's doing, because we can't do it on our own. One person, two people are not enough. We all got to figure out how to create our own system and what we can do within that space to be more productive. So please make sure you go out and support the movement that he has this weekend, 12 p.m. Central Time. And so again, it is your responsibility to share this video. Please make sure that you're sharing this video. All you gotta do is press share. You ain't gotta do nothing special. Just share it on your with your circle of people, and that's how you can contribute to the change in the Black community, by just simply sharing the content, sharing the video, so that others, because you never know who is in your circle that may need to hear this, or being encouraged, or what young man needs to hear on your page may need to see this, and it may help with his identity. It may help him shape who he needs to be or who he wants to be. So please make sure you're not keeping this information to yourself, that you are sharing it.
Yes, indeed. I mean, nothing left to say really, guys, but one of the things that we often hear is knowledge is power. But I don't care how much knowledge you get, how much good information you obtain, if you're not putting it to action, if you're not organizing and actually bringing about some type of motion towards a better, an actual cause of good, of things changing, then you're not really exhibiting any power with that knowledge. So off of that note, you guys, we'll be back here same time, same place next week. Same time, next place, same place next month. And yeah, y'all continue to share. Y'all.
What did you say last time? It get more better and more better.
Yeah, it's just gonna get more better and more better every day. Gooder and gooder.
Gooder and gooder, and better and better.
Yes,
all right, we want to thank you on the Black Podcast. We love you, and continue to share and operate in your space and create your own system. Create your own system. We'll see you guys next